lot of these episode names are just really bad puns. 8 frames per second, I can manually advance the frames faster than that. Missing buck teeth. This happens dozens of times throughout the series, so I'll send them all now. Missing head markings. This also happens multiple times. Giggles for some reason doesn't have a tail. This is never corrected in the entire history of the show, to the point where the writers just say that she has a tail so small that it's invisible. I'm not making that up. This is strangely the only episode Toothy has hair in. The outlines of Lumpy's teeth are blue despite it being black for every other character. This has never changed in the entire history of the show. Cuddle's cheeks are white. For a single frame, Giggle's ear turns dark purple. Toothy's tail doesn't turn correctly with his body. Small gaps can be seen on the character's ears. Missing philtrum. Mistakes with the philtrums also happens many times. Somehow, Lumpy doesn't get hit while the others are spinning like this. Can you hear that? The collective sounds of millions of traumatized kids and mortified parents? Oh wait, no, that's just the sound of Toothy's spine shattering. Toothy's hair disappears after he collides with the tree. And so does his tail. Missing tails also happen frequently. Half of Giggle's face is missing for a single frame. The outline for Giggle's stomach patch turns gold after the pole impales her. Layering error. This happens plenty of times too. Missing leg. Cuddle's hands can be seen exiting out the other end of the plane propeller despite them having been severed, still holding onto the merry-go-round. Somehow Cuddle's ear, eye and head fluff isn't shredded by the plane propeller. All 4 poles of the merry-go-round are intact despite Giggles flying off with one earlier. For a single frame, a different frame of the video is shown. This happens in 17 episodes and a lot of them even spoil what happens in the episode. Cuddle's arms aren't shown until after the merry-go-round stops spinning. Lumpy's antlers swap directions when he turns around. Errors like these also happen frequently. Most of the morals in season 1, instead of being some ironic joke, are just completely irrelevant. For a single frame before Handy makes his annoyed face, a smile can be seen. Also, Handy's eyes are visibly facing different directions. These 2 sins apply to every episode he features in. Why Handy's arms are never restored between episodes despite every character getting mutilated at some point is never explained. Don't even get me started on how Handy does these things as a double amputee. How did he get down so fast? The sound of the drill hadn't even stopped by the time we already see him on the floor. Handy is much taller than he is presented in future episodes. There are no ladders leading up to the treehouse. Extendo arms! The return. Handy's upper arm is visibly disconnected from his lower arm. Repeatedly throughout the episode, Handy's pupils change the direction they face. This error also happens many times as well. Except gosh darn it, this happens so many freaking times that by the time I had only gone through 7 episodes, this segment was already a minute long. I'm just gonna give this series 100 sins in total and call that generous enough. Handy's tool belt moves up his waist as he turns. What could have possibly exploded in there? Petunia's head disappears. The sound of the explosion is audibly delayed. Handy's tool belt disappears for a frame. This frame. Handy seemingly has no ears as there's no bandaging or anything to indicate they were amputated. Funny gag, but how'd you forget you don't have hands? Also, that's ableist. That bucket wasn't there 10 seconds ago. How has Petunia's flower not been reduced to ashes yet? Somehow, Handy sustains no damage from this. There are clearly 2 mouth acids stacked on top of each other. Handy wasn't wearing boots up to this point. Also, there's no way that boot fits Handy's foot. Handy disappears from under Petunia's mangled body between shots. Apparently doing the OK sign makes you grow an extra finger. Petunia survives this. Missing space. Kerning error. The bush disappears when the almost there text appears. Why Giggle's foot is broken in this episode is never explained. The leg that is broken swaps repeatedly. Missing tummy patch. We never see this mother figure for Giggles again. Visible gap at the end of Mother Giggles' arm. Mother Giggles' arm changes colours briefly. Splendid's wings disappears when he holds up Giggles. The acorn shrinks too much when it falls off Giggles' head. The blood splattered on Mother Giggles is a different colour to the blood splattered on the floor. Obliviousness. This is a surprisingly common theme in this series with parental figures. The episode is titled as Antics with a dash in the video, but is titled as Antics without a dash in the YouTube upload title. Missing line break. The bush disappears when Sniffles appears and does not come back. Who just casually does math problems in their free time? Totally not me. Also, I just want to point out that this question is actually being answered correctly, which leads me to believe that everyone at Mondo Media is just a huge nerd! A bone spontaneously appears as Sniffles' tongue travels down the hole. Baby ants don't look anything like adult ants. Even then, why is the baby ant almost as tall as the mother ant? None of the objects the ants use against Sniffles are present when the ants are first shown. The tunnel leading out the door reuses the door texture, which makes it look like there's just a second door there instead of a tunnel at all. Recycled animation. Twice. Anteaters don't have teeth. Even bearing the fact it wasn't there before, how did you even get the electric sawing to begin with? Also, the electric saw isn't powered by anything. The table gets cut by the electric saw, yet is fixed in the next shot. Also, all the blood has been cleared off the table, and don't try to tell me the ants have cleaned it in those 5 seconds between shots. Yes, I counted. The fire visibly animates into the hole despite it seemingly being covered as nothing can be seen inside it. Sniffles' torso is simultaneously blasted away by the explosion and left in place. There is no way blood could have splattered that far. Duplicated assets. How do you misspell the name of your most successful series, Mondo? Cobb is excessively tall in this episode. The safety pin on Cobb's diaper changes directions. There is no way the ball travelled that far. And even if it did, how did it avoid all the traffic? The stupidity is strong with this one. Pop survives this. The cliff wasn't there earlier. Even then, why did you walk that way when Cobb is directly behind you? The wheel somehow falls out of Pop's arm despite being deeply embedded in it. The wheel reappears on Pop's arm for a single frame. That helicopter is too small for anyone to fit in the cockpit. The colour of the blood directly from Pop is a different colour to the blood everywhere else. Floating blood. The cliff is missing for most of this scene. Recycled assets. Duplicated assets. I'm not kidding, the same copy-paste symbol has 5 instances in this one shot. Cobb's body parts are somehow even bigger than Pop's. The quick shot moment in this episode is especially egregious because there is somehow literally no background elements in it. How is that ball not being crushed or popped by now? Also, how did the ball get unstuck from under the stretcher? Okay, how did Cobb's hat get out from the stretcher? Rode Montijo, the person who voice acts Lumpy, isn't credited in this episode. There is a long delay between the Mondo Media splash screen ending and the HDF intro starting. The video title is incorrectly labelled as "What are you waiting for?" The sign turns towards Flaky in this one shot. You bother to animate Flaky blinking, but don't bother to animate her with a shocked expression when the piranhas attack. Cuddle's cheeks disappear. Piranhas don't natively live in ponds. This frame. The bite marks from the piranhas don't appear until much later. Sea lions don't natively live in ponds either. Flaky. Cuddles survives this. Cuddles survives this. Whales don't natively live in ponds as well. The arrangement of Sweets on Nutty's face is different from every other appearance he ever makes. Nutty's arm outline stops abruptly. This doesn't rip off any of Nutty's fur. Don't have any candy crunching sounds? Just use gore! The lollipop stick disappears after Nutty drops it. The rest of the candy that flies off Nutty's face disappears for the rest of the episode. The vending machine operates without being plugged into anything, and don't try to tell me this thing is battery powered. The pain. The lighting differs between shots. The spacing between rows of chocolate bars differs between shots too. How strong must the wrapping on the bar be for Nutty's arm to break before it? This frame. Somehow a chocolate bar lands on top of the vending machine despite there being no chance for it to exit the machine. Somehow one of the chocolate bar's wrappers opens in just the right way and that exact bar falls in just the right place for it to land in Nutty's mouth without any wrapper in it. Somehow Nutty can pull a full smile despite his mouth being stuffed with the chocolate bar. Nutty's arm isn't connected properly. The coils are rotating in the wrong direction, meaning the chocolate bars should be moving back, not forwards. The coils shouldn't be moving forward at all, as all they're doing is rotating in place anyway. Somehow more chocolate bars fall out of the machine despite it being flat on the ground. And even more chocolate bars leak out again from an object that has no exit points from where it's laying. Handy isn't on the featuring list despite having a significant amount of screen time. And what makes this worse is that in the versions of this episode that uses the Season 2 style intro, he is included in the featuring list. Lumpy's steering wheel turns from teal to red and white stripe between shots. If the race is literally about to start, how have Handy or Lifty and Shifty not finished building their carts? Handy's arm knobs aren't visible from here. Lumpy survives this. Shifty's fedora goes missing. Handy's arm knobs are much longer than they should be. Missing arms. The steering wheel was originally in one piece but now has to be fitted together again. The Screaming Mouth's assets are strangely distorted in this episode. This frame. Also this frame. Handy's intestines are visibly in multiple parts despite no cuts being made to them. The inside of the cart seats change from pink to yellow. Visible gap in the cart seat. Shifty's arm repeatedly disappears. Shifty and Lifty's legs aren't visible from this angle. Lumpy's arms are missing. The incorrect font is used. Yeah, that's totally Lifty and Shifty. Seriously though, how'd you even mess that up? It's not like that in any other version. The 3 bottles cast the shadow of a single larger bottle. Petunia's eyelashes are missing. The prize teddy bears are missing multiple times throughout the episode. Haha, blind character that does things blind people really shouldn't do, but boy does this look real insensitive at times. 5 fingers. Exploiting disabled people for money. Wait, but Petunia earlier had 3 balls. Did she pay more for an extra ball? Petunia's eyelashes disappear again. Petunia's elbows barely connect back to her body. Out the way, you moron! The way the wall comes down makes it look like Petunia would have been sliced at the chest, but instead she gets sliced in the middle of the head. Petunia's tail is significantly shorter in this shot, and no, it's clear that it did not get cut with the rest of her. The colour of the blood on the wall is a different hue to the blood on the floor and Petunia. But in an earlier shot, the Ferris wheel was facing parallel to the stand and not perpendicular. Either that is a giant lever no one can reach, or this is a tiny Ferris wheel meant for people the size of Lego people. The walls of the stand turn blue when before they were purple. Lumpy's antlers now have 2 prongs instead of 3. While antlers do contain some amount of blood, they're not entirely filled with it. Somehow Lumpy's ribs are left fully intact. Also, Lumpy has a sideways head. Also, Lumpy's brain is outside of his skull. Also, Lumpy's antlers are not part of his skull. Lumpy's clothes disappear. Missing space. And another. Disco Bear's leg isn't visible from here. The disco ball isn't attached to anything. Awful sound effect timing. Sliding! This frame. Obviously copy-pasted symbols. Aren't most of the characters in the first season meant to be portrayed as kids? And if Disco Bear comes for the 70s, even if the original release date of this episode in 2000, it would put Disco Bear in his 20s. Oh god. For a single frame, Disco Bear has 4 arms. The hue of blood on Giggles' head differs to the blood on the tree stump. The electric fence is seemingly just one single wall and isn't fencing anything. For a single frame, there is a cut section in Petunia's eye. A second electric fence repeatedly appears and disappears. A teacup can be seen inside of Petunia's eye socket. For a single frame, one of Petunia's ribs is mostly cut off. Petunia's hand and feet bones protrude out from her body. This is the most excessive amount of squash and stretch I have ever seen. The only piece of skin ripped off Petunia that was on the fence is on the only part of the fence that's covered by the sign. The skin ripped off from Petunia is left unsinged. Electric shocks can't directly kill someone after the instant of the shock. How do you get that sweaty from doing 3 short dances? Also, gross. Toothy's hair wasn't removed in the intro despite this episode marking the removal of said hair. This happens for the rest of his appearances in this season. Episode title says treasure these idle moments, but video title says treasure those idle moments. Toothy is flipped in the intro. Toothy has normal buck teeth. This happens a lot also. The swing stays suspended in the air in order to avoid Toothy for over 6 seconds. Toy shovel disappears between shots. I can only assume the cursed idol converted a meter of ground below Sniffles into sand because there was no way that sand pit was deep enough to begin with. Somehow this slide can carry the weight of this massive boulder. Pop isn't around to cater for his child. I'm not even going to ask how the cursed idol not only got in Lumpy's car without breaking the window but also managed to strap in the seatbelt. Missing space. Child labour. Cobb is somehow light enough to not capsize the lawnmower. Despite the fact Cobb can barely stay on the floor, he turns the lawnmower no problem. Cobb's safety pin switches directions. The ejection chute on the lawnmower changes sides repeatedly. The same voice clip is used back to back. To back. The angle of this shot makes it look like Cobb would have avoided the brick. The side of Pop's mouth the smoking pipe is changes in the same continuous shot. Pop drops his pipe here but then has it in a later shot without picking it up at any point. Pop's pipe then subsequently disappears. Parts of the orange bottle are coloured blue. Sure, the green bottle also does it, but given in the right light it can look blue. The orange bottle though, no way. This bottle has no grass supporting it. None of these shattered bottles have any tops to them. Same essay is reused 6 times in the same frame. Also, why are there syringes lying on the floor? Don't tell me Pop likes to dope from time to time. This causes no damage to the lawnmower. Pop walks right from the hammock, but the glass shards hit Cobb from the other side. This bottle only merely impales Cub's body, while an identical looking bottle managed to rip right through his head, skull and brain and all. Though I mean, Cub doesn't have a visible skull, so... The bottle manages to slice halfway through Cub's eye socket without slicing any of his eyeball. A glass shard rips off part of Cub's hand, yet it's back in the later shot. Pop sure has some impeccable fathering skills, doesn't he? And don't even get started with the storyboarded ending. This episode's title uses the same pun used in an earlier episode. Justin Bieber. Also, while we're on the subject, can we just add 10 sins for all the terrible jokes used in these blurb episodes, even though there's only 2 of them? Yeah? Yeah, that sounds good. Toothy is wearing the surgical mask wrong as it isn't covering his nose. This frame. One of the straps on Toothy's surgical mask is missing. A third ear appears out of Toothy's head. The head mirror is now at the top of the headband instead of in the middle. An ear sprouts out of Toothy's hand. This frame. Nutty's right gum snaps to the right. Nutty's left ear snaps up his head. This frame. Toothy's ear is detached from his head again. In 3 instances, Toothy's arm is unattached to his body, nor is he holding the drill. The battery somehow doesn't fall out of the drill. Nutty's candy apple isn't upon his head. Man, they really goofed with Toothy's arm converting this episode to HD. The hole carved in Nutty's mouth doesn't bleed. Nutty survives this. And geez, I know HDF likes to exaggerate how much damage some of these things do, but how does someone pull half of their jaw out with a string tied to one of their teeth? Also, this doesn't pull out the rotting tooth right away. The chair Toothy drilled a hole through has magically repaired itself. Nutty and the chair are visibly zoomed out between shots, but the background isn't. The thumbnail for this episode spoils Petunia's death. The wonky perspective of this shot makes it look like Flippy is twice the size of everyone. The excitement of outdoor games is apparently able to instantly cure anxiety. I question as to why Toothy's hand repeatedly flips. Either Toothy is about to fall over, or his body is getting way ahead of his head. Flippy's feet are facing backwards. This woodpecker uses really poorly drawn Pac-Man pupils. No other trees are visible from this angle. Okay, how old is Flippy meant to be in these episodes? Because unlike Disco Bear or Lumpy, Flippy's voice isn't deep at all, yet he's old enough to be a war veteran. Speaking of Flippy's voice, I understand Flippy and Flickpy may be separate consciousnesses in one mind, but how does one body have 2 completely opposing voices? Flickpy's pupils are visibly cut off. Flippy's dog tags are missing. I know this is a first episode kind of problem, but Flippy's eyes appear normal when he's flipped out. If you don't want to get caught, then stop giggling. Toothy's tail shrinks between shots. Transparency per symbol instead of full object. Flippy is never shown to be able to do this again. Toothy goes from smiling to smiling again before actually frowning. Toothy's arm is slightly detached from his body. Toothy's arms crisscross unnaturally. Toothy's arms are layered behind his neck. Flaky's arms aren't visible. Nor are her quills. Petunia's eyelashes are missing. The colour of the leaves are eye dropped directly from the colour of Toothy's fur and tail. Blood splatters before Petunia even fully falls into the pit. Petunia survives this. Petunia's hand not only doesn't bleed, but also doesn't have any blood in it already. Petunia lifts up her right arm, but when Flippy gives her the grenade, it switches to her left arm. This episode was never remastered. Mondo got homophoned. Similarly to Handy, Russell's missing eye, hands, and legs stay missing between every episode. I don't care what you say about the colour of the ground and sky being different every other episode, but if the water is that red, then something must be up. Blatantly obvious stacking of symbols. For a single frame, Russell in the bucket disappears. His legs take an extra second to come back though. The fishing line doesn't appear until the next shot. How is the fishing line staying up without being held? Pufferfish are only able to inflate under the water, as they do so by inhaling the water. The fishing line should have been pulled away by whatever was pulling it. Russell survives this. A grey eye outline appears after the pufferfish impales Russell's neck. Russell's neck skin abruptly cuts off. Once again, I draw the line at a piece of string being able to cut off someone's hand. The line is able to stay in the air despite the other end falling into the sea below the dock. Don't tell me Russell survived that! The thumbnail spoils the pain Flaky goes through. Missing space. Separate missing space. In the original, Flaky is layered above the text, but in the remaster, she's layered behind it. For a single frame, Sniffles' pocket jumps to the other side of his body. Glow-in-the-dark eyes cliché. But also, why do their teeth and gums glow? Sniffles' snout phases through the cut. Sniffles' mouth is facing the wrong way. Sniffles' pocket doesn't move with his body. The hand changes from lefty to righty. It also goes from 3 fingers plus a thumb to 4 fingers plus a thumb. The hand is able to cut through Sniffles' head without cutting his brain. These frames. Giggles' buck teeth becomes gapped. The axe cuts down far enough to take out her teeth, yet her skull still has all of her teeth inside it. The axe somehow cuts through Giggles' body without cutting the optic nerves. The cut is undamaged from this. Sniffles and Giggles' corpses are no longer in the cut. The cut is now much smaller than before. Well, that was a late reaction. Flaky is still able to move her feet despite the muscles of them being burnt off. Half of Flaky's quills disappear despite the lava not reaching high enough to burn them. The top half of Flaky's body doesn't bleed. The car doesn't melt from the lava. The car falls over for no reason. This park is probably going to get some serious lawsuit after this. The thumbnail spoils the pain Toothy goes through. How Toothy got all these injuries is never explained. Those eye assets are not properly round ones like in every other instances of eyes pretty much ever. Toothy's head is unusually circular rather than ovular. The furniture's placement is very inconsistent related to the bed. Mime's cheeks escape the bound of his makeup. Wait, what? Mime's ears are flipped the wrong way, causing his ears to abruptly end. There is no way a desk fan is that powerful to draw the bandage in at that distance. Also, that desk fan is either rotating or facing the wrong way because it should be blowing the bandage away and not sucking it in. The outline of the bandages stopped abruptly, making it look like it stops at the base of his body rather than his leg. How strong must those bandages be for Toothy's leg to snap before the bandages? Toothy's leg bends backwards after it snaps in half. The outline of Toothy's ear bandages stops abruptly. Mime's eyebrows escape the bound of his head. Toothy screams so hard his mouth comes out of the bandages. I mean, why would you think something different would happen the second time? The bandage teleports inside of the fan after it's turned on. The blood splattered on the bed disappears between shots. For a single frame, Toothy's pupil is visible underneath his closed eye. Toothy's ears disappear. The fan is suddenly large enough to fit Toothy's entire body in. The fan is able to suck Toothy in whole despite the clutch being in the way. No pieces of his feet or legs are shown flying out the fan. No organs either. Different blood splatters have different hues in the same shot. I know Lumpy is an A-class idiot, but why does he wear clothes that blend into his skin? In fact, why does he wear clothes at all? No one else does. Lumpy's late skin tone is only shown on his arms and not his upper body. Everything that was on the kitchen desk disappears in a later shot. Nudity jokes. For a few frames, Giggles has a bow under a Girl Scout hat. Giggles' expression instantaneously changes from mild concern to extreme horror. Giggles' eyeball somehow remains intact after being grounded by an egg beater which cut out her optic nerve. Giggles appears out of nowhere. Sniffles, smart guy, doesn't understand how the physics of cold surfaces work. Sniffles' snout becomes significantly shorter after his tongue sticks to the ground. Mitten's cage opens by itself. The rope tied on Sniffles' tail moves up his tail between shots. Sniffles' tongue stops much shorter than in many other appearances. Sniffles' scarf disappears. It then just as suddenly reappears. Lumpy doesn't really have a significant enough role to warrant having a featuring role in this episode. The automatic doors shut even though Lumpy and the sausages are aimed to the doors. There is no distinction between the ground and the sky. A third steak appears in Shifty's hand between shots. Lifty's steak turns into ribs between shots. Who put genuine cartoon physics in my Happy Tree Friends episode? Lifty gets slingshotted back even though he wasn't even carrying the sausages. The trees are still drawn with a pseudo motion blur effect even after the camera stops moving. The design of the door changes between shots. The shadows casted on and by the building disappear between shots. Shifty is grinded in the meat grinder tail first, yet the first sausage to come out contains his eyes. Also, his eye goes through the meat grinder completely undamaged. Also, Shifty is apparently made of green meat. This frame. Lifty's leg disconnects from his body. The ham slicer starts without being turned on. And no, the cleaver didn't hit the button, it's nowhere near the ham slicer and it would have broken the button anyway if it did somehow land on it. Intersecting shadows cause a spot of darker shadow. Shifty's eye somehow isn't chewed up after that. Also cannibalism. The remaster of this episode uses Season 2 styled intro instead of Season 1. Some older versions of this episode have Cuddles' arm disconnect from his body. I can't actually find a video of it, so you're gonna have to settle with this image. How? Nutty Shadow doesn't cover his markings, hand, entire body, and pretty much everything that's on his right side. Also, his eyes aren't visible. The lollipop on Nutty's face disappears. Nutty's lazy eye is on his left eye in this shot. The two lollipops on Nutty's faces swap sides. Nutty shouldn't have been able to enter the beehive from that angle with the direction he was going. Nutty's face can't be seen through the hole of the beehive. Part of the blood disappears a frame late. I know HDF likes to exaggerate how much damage everyday objects can do to you, but this is a little excessive, don't you think? Cuddles' brain extends past his mouth. Two differing hues of blood in the same shot. Cuddles' hair disappears despite not getting sliced anywhere near it. Splendid is flipped in the intro. Five-fingered hand. How is this guy's glasses even staying up? Bear trap on Lumpy's antler doesn't appear until the next shot. There are 9 bear traps on the floor in this shot, yet we only see Splendid throw 3 before they're all gone. Missing wings. Twice. Thrice. The bear trap activates without any pressure being applied to it. The ground is too flat to be clamped by the bear trap like this. The ball doesn't pop or even deflate after being clamped by the bear trap. Cub's ear distorts without being touched by the bear trap. Cub's eye turns into an adult eye instead of just a pupil. The outline of the nose changes colours from hot pink to black. 2 different hues of blood in the same shot. Bear trap appears out of nowhere. It instantaneously changes from afternoon to early evening without any transition. Lumpy's antler loses a prong without there being any cutting present. Russell's hat is somehow heavy enough to not float to the water surface. Russell is somehow able to scream underwater. Sea otters are not able to breathe underwater. This doesn't cause any harm to Russell. Russell is pulled along the seabed for an extensive period of time despite the boat anchoring right on top of him. Quite literally. Electric eels don't natively live in ocean water. Russell doesn't have a body. This is the only time Russell's skeleton shows feet. All future projections show they're amputated. Russell's stubble doesn't get singed with the rest of him, making it look lighter than his skin. Russell's shirt doesn't get shredded or even ripped at all through the coral. Russell's tail also doesn't get scratched in the slightest. Russell has 2 eyelids. Russell's pupil overlaps his eyelid. Blood is seen immediately at the instant of the explosion, even though Russell is deep underwater. Somehow no blood gets mixed in with the seawater. Russell's clothes and body are somehow thrown backwards from the mine explosion. For a single frame, you can see a line with no hook or eye. The thumbnail spoils Sniffles' death. This bowling alley contains a 5th row of pings, meaning this is 15 pin bowling, not 10. Huh? How? 9 pin bowl where the last pin just barely doesn't go down cliche. Either Handy got a guttable first, has had this happen to him multiple times, or is a pro bowler who is trying to go for a perfect score, because getting 9, technically 14, pins on one throw is still pretty good. Reused voice clip. Smart guy thinks this is a good idea, even barring the potential lethality of it, instead of just holding it in the finger holes like a normal anthropomorphic animal. Sniffles is able to vocalize after being decapitated. If that thing is able to come down fast enough to chop off his snout, it should be leaving a dent in the lane at the very least. Sniffles has 2 sets of teeth. The mole doesn't get cut smashing through Sniffles' glasses. The mole's walking stick and Sniffles' head swaps hands when the mole slips on the bloodstain. In an old version of the YouTube upload, the audio for the episode restarts after Handy gets smacked into the bottle. This has since been fixed and only exists in re-uploads. No optic nerve is visibly connected to his eye. It is very unlikely that it got cut in such a way as to not be seen either on his eye or in his socket. The bottle's straw disappears. How? A cliff materializes behind Crow Marmot between shots. The pile of snowballs next to Crow Marmot disappears between shots. The hand Crow Marmot's club is in also switches between shots. The bottom of the cliff in the sloped land has too sharp of a corner for Crow Marmot to continue sliding down it, yet he doesn't. Missing eyelashes. Petunia's eye pops out from her hat. This frame. There are visible tears in Lumpy's body. Lumpy's torso turns the same colour as the rest of his body. Lumpy's antlers lose a prong without there being any clear cut or snap. Lumpy has a massive hole cut in him. Lumpy's shorts disappears. Crow Marmot changes the direction he's facing instantaneously between shots. Twice. Crow Marmot disappears between shots. This frame. Tree stump is drawn without an outline unlike everything else in the foreground. Nothing is visibly fueling the fire. Flaky's hand clips through the sleeping bag. Cuddles' mouth repeatedly escapes the band of his head. Cuddles' arm isn't attached to his body. Flippy's beret has 2 crests on it. Flippy sits on nothing. Flippy blinks into frame for 1 frame. Cuddles' intestines are straighter than they really should be. Cuddles has no ribs. Cuddles' heart is located next to his intestines when it should be well above it. Flippy's left pupil is slightly cut off and his right pupil slightly escapes his eye. This mouth asset in particular having no philtrum is especially bad because in the last episode it did have a philtrum. Cuddles' nose is left on his face despite his face being entirely slashed off. Flaky doesn't think it's a good idea to run away at this point. The zipper of the bag is shown at first but then disappears when the bag is picked up. This is the only season whose final episode has a unique intro, and versions with the season 2 intro don't have a unique intro at all. The finale block goes in front of the intro before actually crushing it. The bus isn't present until the frame after the fade-in begins. Cuddles is shown at the back row of the bus in the first shot and then is shown to be in the second to back row for the rest of the episode. Literally none of these seats have seatbelts, no wonder you guys get murdered every episode. That's not how Toothy sounds like. Petunia's mouth is facing backwards. No seats besides the last row or other characters are visible in the shot. Cuddles' arms and hands duplicate after being sliced in half. Cuddles' hands have paw pads, which is never seen on any character at any other point. Mime's cheeks are way more than halfway off his makeup. Mime's nose, mouth, makeup and ears shouldn't turn blue and purple along with his face. Sniffles' snout moves from in front of his book to behind his book between shots. Typical Lumpy. Missing eyelashes. Why is it always Petunia that has her eyelashes go missing? P-jokes. The outline of Lumpy's tongue and teeth are black when they're blue in every other instance. That being said, it swells from blue to black every frame. And in this shot, it doesn't animate at all. None of the other characters are visible in this shot. Petunia's air freshener doesn't wrap around her neck properly. Petunia's head marking escapes the bound of her head. The puddle of urine on the floor disappears. The mole, Flaky and Handy were not seen on the bus until this point. Neither Lifty, Shifty, Flippy or Pop are shown to be on the bus. I say Pop because he was originally going to be in part 2 instead of Flippy. To be continued. Paul Allen's name is misspelled as Paul Allen.